Chairman. And since this is my first meeting as a member of this prestigious subcommittee, I wanted to maybe just say to Secretary Gates, I look forward to working with you, and I thank you for your leadership and commitment. And to Admiral Mullen, we've met before. We've worked together from time to time, and thank you for the guidance that you've given not only the Navy but all our military services. And I know we've had conversations from time to time about a place called Naval Station Mayport, and I didn't want you to be disappointed in me not at least mentioning that. And I would just simply say in that regard to thank you and the Secretary for applaud your approval of the strong language in the Quadrennial Defense Review in supporting the Navy's decision to make Mayport capable of homeporting a nuclear carrier. And to give you just a brief update, the first couple of projects have come in under budget at a substantial savings, and I'm looking forward to working with the CNO and Secretary Mabus to make sure that these remaining projects are completed on a timely basis so we can continue to capitalize on this environment of lower construction costs. I just wanted to say that. But I wanted to ask a question about Afghanistan. We've talked a little bit about it before. My last trip there was about a year ago in a delegation headed by Mr. Dix. And one of the things that I found interesting when we talked about counterinsurgency, we met with our military leaders, with General Caldwell in particular, and talked about the fact that the Taliban could often use the fact that these foreign invaders were coming in and they would recruit people for their cause. And one of the aspects that we were trying to develop was the security forces, the police force, National Army, to take away one of those recruiting tools so the Taliban couldn't argue that these were foreign invaders. And we met with the Afghani leaders and found that it was not that easy to develop that kind of security force. In fact, Marja, the offensive there, had just taken place, and we learned that there had been some problems with the local police, the National Army, but those problems were being worked through. So I hadn't really focused on that over the last year, but I just read about 2 weeks ago an op-ed piece by General Caldwell where he talked about one of the untold stories of the last 15 months has been the development, the coming forward of the Afghanis to join the police, to join the National Army. And it gave him a real sense of hope where there was not much hope some 15 months ago. And so I wanted to ask you all a couple of questions about that. Number one, do you agree with that assessment that he's made? Number two, do you see some continued successes coming out of that building of the Afghani national security? And three, in light of the fact that in this 2012 budget there's $12 billion of money, and in these difficult times, what is your expectation as we go forward in terms of the money that will be spent to continue to build that Afghani security force, recognizing that there will be a day when they need to be able to support themselves? So could you comment on those three aspects?
Sure. We'll both take a crack at it. First of all, I think that the progress that has been made in both recruiting and training the Afghan National Security Forces over the past year has really been quite extraordinary. And just as one example, the percentage of trainees who qualify with marksmanship has gone from about 35% a year or so ago to about 95% now. And we see the results of that. Going to your other points, we see the results of that in campaigns such as the one going on around Kandahar right now, where in fact about 60% of the forces that are engaged in that enterprise to the west and to the south of Kandahar are Afghans. We are in the minority. Our ISAF forces are in the minority in that respect, and they are being very effective and showing the ability to increasingly act on their own. They need our mentoring, I think, for quite some time to come. And they, like the Iraqis, have real problems when it comes to logistics and maintenance and things like that. Combined arms, intelligence fusion, we're going to have to give them some help in that kind of training, I think, for quite a while. But they really are stepping up, and they're getting more and more people out into the field, as I mentioned in responding to Mr. Moran's question. The Afghan security forces have lost over 5,000 of their own members. I mean, willing to put their lives on the line for their own country. So I think that this is a real success story over the last year, and I would say that if there has been one of the areas that has been most successful has been our experience with developing the ANSF. In terms of the costs, I had a very frank conversation last week. I had both the Afghan Defense Minister and Interior Minister here, and made it quite clear to them that the United States would not and could not sustain the level of support at the level that you describe of $12 billion plus for very long, maybe for 2 or 3 years, but not beyond that. And that hopefully by 2014 there will be some kind of a political settlement that will allow them to scale back the size of their forces so they won't need as much. Alternatively, they need to figure out a way to structure them differently, perhaps with a much smaller regular force and a much larger National Guard type force that could be called up when there's a problem. And then the third channel is obviously as countries begin, as the 49 countries that are engaged in the military effort with us begin over the next 3 years, draw down their military forces, to have them contribute more to sustaining the Afghan security forces. This is a burden that we largely carry alone at this point. And I think that, so I think we have given them the message pretty explicitly, don't count on this indefinitely. And we're going to have to think about what this looks like after 2014.
Just a couple quick comments. We have, I think there are 24,000 Afghans in training right now in a training structure that a year ago didn't exist as we've stood this up. And I think to your very direct question, I think General Caldwell in the op-ed piece, it is an untold story of success. And actually there was great criticism very early as to whether or not we could do this. And they're actually leading in places now that we couldn't have imagined. And it also, strikes me that roughly a year ago we initiated Marja. They had local elections there yesterday. So the improvement there has been pretty extraordinary. That doesn't mean that we don't have significant challenges. Secretary talked about the marksmanship piece. We've also initiated a very comprehensive literacy program because illiteracy is a big problem there. But a large number of the Afghan security forces are now reading at the first grade level, and there's actually a significant accelerated to get their leaders up to a third grade level. Now, looking at that from the American perspective, you might say not so good. This is Afghanistan we're talking about, not here. It's been an extraordinary accomplishment that gives them a level of competence and confidence that they just didn't have before. And I think, at least as we look at it right now, as their forces have come online, this goal of 2014 and transitioning to them is a very realistic goal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.